Thank you everyone for coming tonight, and thanks to Pat Callahan for being with us. And we're looking forward to learning about the 10 habits of highly effective library boards.
Okay. Well, this is not going to be as exciting as the Super Bowl that you watched in your viewing parties that last Sunday, or Sunday before. So, but I'll try and make it as interesting as I can. So let's go ahead and put the slides up, Samantha, and we'll get started with the slides and kind of take you through this. Go to the next one. Okay. I've never been on a library board, so I'll tell you that right now. I've been on a lot of boards and a lot of commissions over the years, but my whole career has been in city government. I was a city manager for many years in Maquoketa. Prior to Maquoketa, I lived in West Point, Iowa, and Fort Madison, way down in that southeast corner. But I became city manager in Maquoketa at the very young age of 28 years old, as you can tell, a long time ago. And where in Maquoketa, I worked quite closely with Karen, our library director there for many years. And then later they put a very nice addition onto the library in Maquoketa. And then I did consulting for about 10 years. And that's when I got into kind of this kind of work, doing workshops and doing special studies for a gentleman named Tim Shields at the Institute of Public Affairs. Institute of Public Affairs no longer exists today. It was basically lost its funding. But while I was there, Tim was great on doing workshops like this, and actually had me kind of write the outline of what I'm going to talk about tonight. We didn't actually turn it into a workshop till a little later. Then from there, I went to Anamosa, where I had the good fortune of coming to Anamosa, where we had a brand new library, and it's absolutely beautiful. In fact, if you are in Anamosa, take time to see it. It's near the downtown area, but it is a great facility. So I've had the good fortune then of working in some towns that have wonderful libraries. But like I said, I've never been on the board, but I've been a city manager for a number of years and have been a consultant for a number of years. And my observations were that there's basically, when it comes to cities and library boards, there's kind of the two far extremes sometimes. There's the ones that are very successful and get a lot done. And then there's others that kind of struggle, both in city, in government, and with libraries as well. So let's go to the next slide. And, you know, when I first did this presentation for mayors and councils at the Iowa League of Cities meeting last September, which is how Samantha heard about it, I kind of stepped back and reflected on my 48 years in city government. Like I said, 23 as a city manager and 25 as a consultant. And I kind of asked myself the question, why are some cities so successful? You know, why is it they get so much accomplished and, you know, they're just looked upon as a community that's really, you know, moving forward and doing a lot of great things. And then I looked at other cities that I've worked with and have known over the years, and it seems like everything's a struggle. There's constant infighting or bickering going on. And I've also noticed that sometimes there's these cycles, you know, where there's a cycle of success and then things are not so good. And we get some new people on these councils or new people on the boards, and then we kind of spiral downward. So what I did was then I kind of reflected back on all that time and said, okay, the ones that were successful, what did they do differently than the ones that were not successful? And so that's how I came to put this particular one together. And as I go through it, I guess I will ask you, where does your board fit? Where are you in the overall scheme of things? So let's go to my disclaimers. Okay, first thing I want to mention is not every city and every board does all 10 of these things. So I don't want to give you the impression that if we don't do everything on this list, we're not going to be successful. No, that's not what I'm saying. But the general rule of thumb is that if you adopt some of these habits, and some of which you already have in place, you enhance your probability of being successful. Now, the other added bonus with all of this is you might make this job of being a board member or a library director a little more enjoyable. And I often talk to people that are on boards or commissions, and they tell me how bad it is and how much they dislike it. And I sometimes turn to them and I say, why are you on there? Why do you continue to put up with this if it's not going to change? And so I'm gonna basically talk about those places where I've observed where they really have their act together, where they've done some things that are great for the community. And the other thing I'm going to ask you throughout this, maybe from time to time, is if you're in one of those communities that maybe is struggling, what can we do to turn things around? And the other thing I might challenge you to think about is, and I do goal setting for city councils, and I start out the session by asking them this: what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered? Because all of us, when we serve on any kind of a board or commission or city council, I don't care what it is, there will be a legacy. You will be remembered for something. Now, I mentioned that Anamosa has a brand new library. You know, I can name for you some of the board members that were on that board that worked diligently to get that job done and helped raise the money to get it done. And that is part of their legacy. And so we will all have a legacy someday. And so think about that. What do you want your legacy to be for this particular role that you're in right now, which is a library board member? So, okay, let's go to my page. I got a couple of quotes there for you. I've been using these quotes for years, and I wasn't sure where they came from. And so I Googled that first one there and come to find out it was an English author who wrote the book of all things Alice in Wonderland. And that was that if you don't know where you want to go, any road will get you there. And of course, you think about that book, Alice in Wonderland. Then there was another quote that I ran across years ago, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out for sure where it came from. But when I was a young boy, I grew up on a farm not too far from Cascade. Early morning, I'd listen to the radio, and there was a gentleman named Earl Nightingale. Now, I'm really going back in time. So you have to be at least my age or older, which is 72, to know who I'm talking about. But there was a kind of a philosopher, a gentleman who was very smart, and his name was Earl Nightingale. And I'm pretty sure that's where this one came from. And that is, if you don't know what you want to be, then you have no control over what you will end up becoming. So that's kind of what my theme is here tonight. If you don't take control of some of those things, you never know what's going to lie ahead for you. So let's do a general overview of the session. I'm going to review all 10 of these habits that I've come up with. I'm going to give them about 5 minutes each. And if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat room there. And if I happen to spot it, we'll answer it. Samantha many times can call my attention to something if I miss it. So, but the other key thing that I'm looking for that would be really add a lot of value to what I'm doing here tonight is when I talk about some of these things, if your board or your library is doing something like that, it would be great for you to share with us an example of it. Ideally, maybe it's something that's on your website. So you just might say, I know we got some folks from Forest City here tonight. Okay, Forest City, go to our website. You will see exactly what he's talking about. And so if you could share that with us, or if it's not on your website, if you could send it maybe to me or Samantha, and we'll make it available as part of the kind of the supplemental handouts that would go with this, because it is being recorded. So that's how you can help us out, is if you're already doing this, we'd love to know that, because it will really add to it. And as I talk about some of these things tonight, I'm going to mention some cities that are doing these things at the city council level. Remember, I told you I did this session first for the Iowa League of Cities at their annual conference, and that's how Samantha heard about it. And that was live. And so I was able to interact with the audience. And as I went down through the 10 habits, a number of cities said to me, yes, we are doing that. And I had someone in the audience, actually was Tricia from Dyersville. I know we got somebody watching from Dyersville. So I've known Tricia, your city clerk, for many, many years. And so she was nice enough to be at that workshop and help me out. And so she recorded all the cities that raised their hand and said, yes, we have done that here in the city. So, okay, let's go to habit number 1. What I'm saying here is we got to start with the basics. And many communities, many boards do what is called a mission statement. And it's a very concise and brief, maybe 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences at the top that basically says, this is what we're here for. This is what we are all about. This is our mission in life at this particular part of our life, is to do this. And basically, it talks about providing great service and, being on the cutting edge of technology, whatever it is you want to say. And as a part of that, and some people might call it a little different, and that's a vision statement. This will be a little longer, and it might be bullet points. It might be 4, 5, or 6 bullet points that talk about what your vision is for the future. And then another thing that I've seen done is to sit down and develop some long-range goals and objectives. Now, at the city level, it's called a comprehensive plan. So I would imagine if you're from a city of any size and you, especially if you have zoning ordinances, you more than likely have a comprehensive plan. I guess what I'm challenging those of you who are with library boards, do you have a comprehensive plan for the library? Where are you going into the future? What are your long-range goals and your long-range objectives? And the other thing I think is critical to all of this is to, when you bring on those new board members, to have something available to so that they can get acclimated to what it is you're doing, what your mission is, what you're all about, what your goals and objectives are. And actually, I did a workshop for this very topic, orientation sessions. It was geared towards city councils. And I did it at the city clerk's workshop in October. It's called the Iowa Municipal Finance Officers Association. And if your city clerk was at that, they would have gotten a pretty elaborate handout that you could take and adopt for a library board. It was, like I said, it was geared towards city councils, but it talks about all the things that you might want to do when you have a brand new board member who is totally new to this, that you kind of get them started on the right foot and give them the information that they need so they can be, you hit the ground running, so to say. So, but if you'd like to see the handout, if your city clerk doesn't have it, we certainly can provide that to you as well. Now, some of the cities that said that they had mission statements and had vision statements that were at my workshop included Asbury, Fairfield, Dubuque, Sibley was another one out in Western Iowa, Hiawatha, Clinton, Guttenberg, and Decorah were some of the cities that were at that workshop that said they had done some of these things, which is basically the mission statement, the vision statement. You can probably access some of that stuff on their website. And if you just want to see a model, I know Fairfield, I helped them do theirs, and I helped Asbury do theirs. And I'm pretty sure that they are on their websites. So if you want to see what goes into a mission statement or a vision statement, there's plenty of ones out there to look at from the city level. So, and the bottom line on all of this is what do you stand for? What are you trying to do in terms of the operation of the library and the services that you provide? So it just provides a guide for everything else. Everything then kind of falls back in what your overall mission is, your vision, and your goals, and it just provides a wonderful guide going forward. So, okay, let's go to that. Habit number 2. Habit number 2 is when you kind of understand the fact that the board is a collection of a lot of diverse people with varying backgrounds and different viewpoints on how they see life, maybe even how they see the library and what they think is the mission of the library. And you're probably going to have, and I know with the state law that requires gender balance, I know in the past library boards many times were almost all females. Well, now, and then there was other boards like planning and zoning, they were male dominated. Well, the state law a few years ago, it was passed, said we got to work towards gender balance. Now, is there a law that mandates somebody that you're going to get fined or go to jail if you don't do it? No, there isn't. There's no There's no penalties involved, as far as I know. But the mission is to have a very diverse group of people, and certainly you're going to have you might have a very diverse age group, and you might have a very younger group of folks, and you might have some older folks, and that might impact how they see technology. There's folks my generation that we came on the scene kind of late on all that technology, but others grew up with it, and so I think it's important to understand where people come from. The other key thing is that you as a board member cannot do anything on your own. You have no power as an individual. The only way you have any power is when you all come together and you have a legally convened meeting and you have a legally posted agenda, and then you have power, and then you can do something if you get some colleagues to go along with what you're trying to do. So that's a hard thing for some people to understand, that maybe have been in the private sector and they were, quote, the boss, and they were used to getting done exactly what they wanted to do. And now all of a sudden they're just one of 7-member board, and they can't get anything done by themselves. They have to have the full support of the board going forward. So the whole idea, of course, is now you're kind of working together to accomplish a specific purpose. And Bonnie is, of course, is here. Bonnie McCune. She wrote an article for the Cityscape magazine on the 7 habits of highly effective boards, and I'm going to refer to that article from time to time. I should have added it as a supplement handout, but I'm sure you can access it. But number 7 on Bonnie's list was this very next thing, and that is a key to all of this is trust. And openness and mutual respect. Because if one of those 3 items is missing, your time on that board is not going to be fun. And I know there are a few occasions out there where city councils and boards are missing 1 or 2 or all 3 of those key ingredients. And if one of those 3 ingredients is not there, I can almost guarantee you that your time on that board will be less than rewarding and less than enjoyable. So it's important that you develop that relationship. Now, that does not mean you have to agree on everything. You can still have a difference of opinion on any number of different things. But the key thing is that you have a good discussion, and everyone is open, and everyone is a part of that discussion. And then after that discussion, the board makes a decision, and then the board members as a group support that decision. Because here's the example I use with city councils that I think would be appropriate, particularly if you have something controversial that comes before the board. And at the board meeting, you have a very good discussion. You reach a consensus. This is what we're going to do. And you maybe put it to a vote. Maybe it's a split vote, which is nothing wrong with a split vote. But what does tear a board apart after the split vote is what happens when you talk to the public the next day. So let's say you have a controversial subject. Let's say it makes it in the paper. Everybody knows about it, and everybody knows it's a split vote. And you go to a grocery store and someone there gets you in the aisle and says, hey, I see where the board did this. I see you were in the voting against that. Boy, isn't that, boy, weren't they stupid to do that? Well, there's 2 responses you can have. The first response would be, yes, I can't believe those people. What are they thinking? Why did they do that? I voted against it. I tried to talk them out of it, but they wouldn't listen. Okay, that's one way to respond. Now, what image does that send to your citizen? What image does that send to the patrons of the library? The other response you can give them is, we had a thorough discussion. We looked at the pros and cons. We had a good deliberation. And in the end, a majority of the board said, this is what we need to do. And as a member of the board, I respect that. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow the majority decision on this. If you can adopt that approach after you're on the losing end of something, it's going to do 2 things. Obviously, it's going to remove some of that stress that you may feel when you've been on the losing end of something. but also it enhances the image of your board. Because if you go with the first one I gave you and you badmouth fellow board members, now you portrayed an image to the outside world that we don't have a very good library board. So always think about that when you are approached by people who are not on the board, when they ask you about maybe a controversial decision. Now, let's hope your board is never up against something like that. Let's hope you never have a split vote, but you might from time to time. And there are some occasions out there when I've heard about library boards having split votes and having some serious concerns. And I'm not going to name the cities, but they're not all that far from where I live. So I'm very much aware of it. So let's go to habit number 2. Okay. In order to be a contributing and good board member, you really got to master the ability to have good discussions in small groups. You got to have the ability to work with others. And obviously, you got to have the knowledge to do the job. So you need that background information that can be provided to you by your library staff. And the other thing is you got to have that ability to look at issues rationally and kind of just step back and say, okay, what's the best thing to do here in the overall scheme of things? And for the good of the library going forward and the good of our community going forward, what is the best way to rationally approach this issue? I always tell councils when I do this presentation that you were given an awesome responsibility. When the public elected you to the city council, that was an awesome responsibility that they entrusted with you. Same thing with library board members. Someone on that city council said, this person would make a great member of our library board. More than likely, a lot of you were probably approached about it. Someone might have come up to you and said, hey, we got an opening on the library board. What you think about doing that? And so I think it's important for you to understand and respect that responsibility, but also to remember the dignity of the office. I fully commend and respect anyone that's willing to step forward and volunteer in their community to be a part of a board or a commission or run for elected office. Man, it's a lot easier to just sit at home and watch football games and, watch The Bachelor than it is to get up, leave your house, or go to your computer lately with Zoom meetings and partake in a library board meeting. So thank you for what you do, because in Iowa, we rely on our volunteers to do a lot of this stuff. So, and Bonnie talked about something very important in her number one item, her number one habit, and that is how it's so important for this decision-making process to have a good board president. That good board president that can, bring things to a conclusion, bring things to a consensus, and that is not an easy task. I've been the chairman of various boards and commissions over the years, and sometimes the old phrase that I sometimes hear, it's like reining in cats, and so it can be challenging. But I hope that when it comes time to pick a board president, that you carefully look at their skills and abilities to lead the discussion and to help bring board members to a consensus. And so it may not necessarily always be the elder member of the board. It may be someone brand new. I remember when Chief Justice was the Supreme Court was appointed. He had no experience in terms of being on the Supreme Court, but he immediately became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts. And so sometimes I would ask you, there may be a John Roberts on your library board that maybe is fairly new. Maybe they've only been there a year or two, but you see in them the skill and the ability to work with people, to be rational. And maybe that person is your best board president versus this person who's been there forever and ever. Sometimes I think we reach the conclusion, well, it's their, quote, their turn to be board president. They've been here for a long time. I would urge you to kind of take a little more open approach to that and try and pick the best person. to be your board president, no matter who it might be. So the other good thing to have in your hands when you're talking about the process of making decisions in board meetings is to have a good set of bylaws. And so a good set of bylaws can help you navigate some of these things, particularly if you're up against a controversial subject and you need to fall back on something. So if you don't have a set of bylaws, you might reach out and see if other library board members have. And by the way, if any of you out there do have a good set of bylaws, please let us know that so that we can share it with other people. Or better yet, if it's on your website, it'd be a lot easier to access. Okay, let's go to habit number 4. I've noticed over the years, particularly with councils and city staff, that it seems like those councils and boards that have a good understanding of what their role is and what the role of the staff. One of the things that concerns me with some board members that they have the belief that, and this is council members too, they have the belief, I'm on the board, I can go in and tell that library director to do whatever I want. And so when I walk in there and I think this needs to be done, he or she should do it. And there should be no questions asked. Well, many times that's not our role as a board member. Our role is to set policies, help adopt procedures. It's up to your library director then to carry that out. Now, if the library director is not carrying it out to your satisfaction, then that's something you take back to your full board. You don't walk in the library and start giving orders to people. Just as city council members shouldn't be walking into City Hall and giving all kinds of orders to staff members or the guy driving the snowplow or all those kinds of things. So it's really critical that everyone knows their responsibilities and know what their role is in the organization. And once everybody does know their role in the organization, then we kind of have this expected performance. We can expect that the behavior of the person will fit the role that's been assigned. And so now there's some things that you can do to kind of help that situation, particularly if you've had some maybe issues in the past and maybe you've gotten by them. And that is to adopt what is called a code of conduct. This wasn't talked about too much in the past, but in recent years, I've been promoting this idea. And I actually wrote an article on it in the Cityscape magazine for the Iowa League of Cities. So if you get that magazine and you go back in the archives, you'll see that article I wrote. And that is, it lays out the parameters and the expectations of how a board member or how a city council member will conduct themselves. What is appropriate behavior and what isn't appropriate behavior? There are actually cities out there that have adopted a code of conduct. And when we asked for a show of hands at the league meeting in September, here are the cities that said they have this. And you may recognize some of these names, but Avoca, Iowa, way out in western Iowa, Asbury, which is near Dubuque, Central City, which is near Cedar Rapids, Sac City, out in western Iowa, and Fairfield. And then the last town that said they had adopted a code of ethics was Cascade. So if you, I don't know if any of these folks have these code of conducts on their website. If you would like to see what a code of conduct looks like, I have the one for Asbury, and I can certainly send it to you. Now, I always tell city councils, when's a good time to adopt a code of conduct? Well, it probably isn't when you're fighting and there's a big disagreement about something, particularly if you have the term I use, the renegade that's on your city council that just does whatever they want. And maybe they're embarrassing the city, probably embarrassing themselves too, if they have assumed that role as the renegade. Now, once again, I come back to there's nothing wrong with split votes, but it all comes down to your conduct during that process. So usually when that's going on, that's probably not a good time to adopt a code of conduct. The time to adopt a code of conduct is when everything's going good and well. That's the time to sit down. You know what? Things are really going very good right now. Maybe this would be a good time to sit down and thoughtfully put together a code of conduct that future generations will use and hopefully appreciate. Now, what do you do if you get that person who ignores the code of conduct? There are some things you can do. And we see this from time to time, and that is we can censor them, which is basically telling the public this person's out of line. I know if I were someone like that, I wouldn't want that in my legacy. I was censored for whatever. And then there's always the possibility when it comes to a library board, and once again, I'm not a legal expert on this, so I'm not going to profess to be, but I suspect if someone is really getting out of line, there's probably a way for removal from the library board. God forbid you'd have to go through that. I hope you never experience that situation where you even contemplate that. But I know there's a few horror stories out there about that sort of thing. So Bonnie mentioned that in the appendix of the policy leader handbook for city councils, there might be something on a code of conduct. So that's good to know, Bonnie. Anyway, so give some consideration to that concept and see if it makes sense to you. Obviously, there's no rush. You can kind of take your time in doing it. And I would start at City Hall and just ask them if they have a code of conduct. Have they ever thought about doing it? And then, like I said, I'll repeat these cities to you again. And I tell you, city clerks and city managers have a great network out there. So I can tell you, they're going to know somebody in one of these six cities. Once again, it's Avoca, Asbury, Central City, Sac City, Fairfield, and Cascade. So those folks tell me that they have a code of conduct. Okay, let's go to habit number 5. And this is one of the more critical habits, and I can't stress this one enough, and that is to have a good working relationship between the board and your library staff. If that relationship is not what you would hope it to be, once again, being a library board member is not going to be a fun job. And so it's important that we think back to that previous slide. We talked about the roles of everyone. And so in order to have a good working relationship and a good working partnership, the board needs to realize that their role is to establish the vision, establish the goals, the policies, and then empower staff to get it done. Kind of what we talked about in that first habit is doing all of these things and laying the groundwork. Then the next thing board needs to do is define what needs to get done, define the needs to be met, the outcomes to be achieved. That's what your board meetings are all about, where you talk about what the needs of the library are. You talk about what you want to see the outcomes to be, and you kind of lay out a game plan for them to kind of, follow through. Then on the other side of the table is that's up to the staff then to carry out the directives, to complete the tasks that have been assigned, and most importantly, to provide you as a board member some feedback, because sometimes it may not be going as you had hoped, but hopefully it is going well. And so they provide positive feedback. But occasionally, if things have not played out as expected, then you would hope your staff would bring it back to you and say, I know the board is expecting and hoping to do this, but because of these reasons, it's not working out. So that it's so important for you as board members to get that feedback on both the positive and the negative side of things. So it all comes down to that slide before we talked about having trust, communication, and then providing evaluation of the board members. And actually, once again, Bonnie talked about this in habit number 1 in her little article. If you do not have that good working relationship, it hurts everyone. It hurts the board, it hurts the staff, it hurts the patrons. And so this is so critical that this be one of your habits is to have that good working relationship, which means there's no micromanaging. We follow the chain of command. And, as a board, we provide direction to the staff of the library to accomplish what it is you want to get done. So this is so critical that you have that good working relationship. Occasionally, I have been in cities where that relationship has been less than ideal, and it's critical that that be corrected. Now, it can be corrected in any number of different ways. The worst situation is termination. But if your library staff is not doing what you want, that's obviously the last resort. I hope you don't have to ever go down that road. But if there's just a difference of opinion and you can't reach an agreement on where you're going with this, sometimes that occasionally happens. And so I've seen it happen in a few situations. I've actually seen it happen. Not very many, but occasional library board have had to cross that path. So, but bottom line is that last key thing. There's got to be the trust, there's got to be the communication, and there's got to be the evaluations. And if you're not doing performance evaluations of your library director, you need to start that. And so, because how else are they going to know if they're doing what it is that you're expecting of them? And, performance evaluations are not something to be fearful of, and they're not something that you want to dread, because not only are you going to talk about maybe some areas for improvement, you're also going to probably pat them on the back and say, we really appreciate how this has been handled, how you've been doing this part of your job. And it also then maybe occasionally offers some constructive criticism. But all too often I find that that library boards and city councils are just, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Well, you're not doing your library director any favor. And so provide that library director with that feedback, because worst thing you can do is allow that director to continue doing everything that they're doing and you're not happy with it. And for whatever reason, this is not what you wanted to see. And then you don't say anything, because man, you're doing that person a real disservice, because I can guarantee you they're making the assumption I'm not hearing anything, so this is all good. I'm going to keep going just the way I've been going. No, if you're not happy with what you're seeing, now is the time to make that correction so that they can, make adjustments, and live up to what the expectations of the board is. So let's go to habit number 6. And that is, and Bonnie did a nice job in covering that as her habit number 5 as well. And that is periodic feedback on policy results. And there's what's up to the staff, your library board director and your staff, to give you some, information on how things are going with maybe you made some changes. Maybe you've got some programs in place. Maybe you set up this great program and nobody's doing it. Nobody signed up for it. I don't know. But it involves, reports, staff memos. It might even involve a newsletter where you talk about a new program that you've got and you talk about how it's going. It might require that you make some changes, make some amendments. And I'm a great believer in work sessions for city councils. Now, like I said, I've never been a library board member, so I don't know if you folks do work sessions, but many times your monthly meetings have a long list of things that you got to take care of and do. And sometimes you don't take time to really dig into one issue. And it might be an advantage to you to occasionally have a work session where you really delve into one issue and give it a good, thorough discussion and look at all the information you have on it. And I don't know what that issue would be for you, but the important thing is that if there's something really critical, occasionally a special meeting, a special work session can be very helpful in reaching conclusions on those difficult issues. And the other thing, board members, be sure and be open to both good results and bad results. Please don't be one of those board members that the term I like to use is they shoot the messenger of bad news. Please don't shoot the messenger of bad news. If there's something out there that's less than positive, be open to it, be willing to change, be flexible if you need to be. So that would be one last bit of advice I'd give you. Okay, let's go to number 7, and that is you need to put a little time and effort into this, as you well know. That's why when you set your goals and objectives, that's usually a special meeting. Some people refer to it as an annual retreat. Now, some people don't see the need to do this annually. I have some city councils that do it biannually, but doing a goal setting session is really helpful to your staff. And in fact, I help a lot of city councils do goal setting sessions. I just did one in Asbury. I've done some in Muscatine, Adel. I just did one in Dyersville. I know we got somebody from Dyersville watching. And when I do goal setting sessions, I make all the department heads a part of the process. And that includes the library director. So what I do is I do an advanced questionnaire where I ask council members, department heads, library board members, or not board members, but library directors, to tell me 5 things. What are accomplishments? What's going well? What are issues and concerns you have? Number 3, what are some of the programs and policies and initiatives that we should think about in the future? And number 4 is, are there any capital needs, major repairs, major building, major equipment purchases that we need to consider? And lastly, all these things I've been talking about. What can we do to work better as a team? Our team building objectives. And so we cover those 5 things in goal setting. If you have an interest in doing something like this, more than likely, there's some folks out there that have gone through this process at your city hall, the city council. So reach out to them and they can talk to you a little bit about what goes into a goal setting process. Some of the handouts I gave you have talked a little bit about goal setting, so you can see that in the literature I provided. The other thing, I'm not sure, as I already talked about these work sessions, some councils do them monthly. I'm not sure if a library board would need to do a monthly work session, but you might do a biannual work session to delve into those more complex issues. And the other thing is, once again, in Bonnie's number 5, and that is community relations, interacting with your citizens, interacting with your patrons at the library, and finding out what it is that they appreciate, what they like, and if there's any adjustments you need to make. Now, this may not necessarily pertain to all library boards, but I push city councils to do a capital improvements plan. Once again, when I help a city do a capital improvements plan, we involve the library. In fact, I'm doing one right now in Prescott, Iowa, and I've had 2 or 3 different meetings, and the library director has been a part of that and been invited to the meetings. But there's a lot of cities out there that don't do capital improvements plans. A lot more do goal setting, but a lot fewer do these, what I call CIPs. So they are looking at your capital needs. In the case of the library, would be major repairs to the library. It could be maybe the windows, the air conditioning, the furnace, concrete paving of the parking lot, whatever it might be. But it's identifying those needs and then figuring out when to do them, and obviously more importantly and more challenging, how to pay for them. And so a capital improvements plan puts all those items on the table at the same time, analyzes them, ranks them, and then comes up with a plan on how to pay for them. And a lot of cities do something along those lines. They just don't call it a capital improvements plan. And a lot of cities, I can see here, they do it early in the budgeting process. They would have done it back in November, December. And then the projects that are identified in year 1 go into the budget that's being put together right now. In fact, most city clerks pretty much have their budget wrapped up by now because of the publication requirements. But I would urge you to, if you haven't done something like this, just do a little brainstorming and put together a list of projects that you think the library needs to address. These are actual physical plant needs or computer equipment or any big ticket items that wouldn't normally go into the annual budget. Or if they went in the annual budget, might cause some added costs that you're not really prepared to handle. So, and of course, where you come up with the money is in library board is going to vary from getting more money from the city on property taxes to a big project might require a bond issue or donations and gifts from individuals. Let's go to number 8, and that is number 8 is to set clear rules and procedures at your board meetings. And this is where it's important to maybe if you don't have some bylaws, maybe have some bylaws. I gave you a handout that talks about effective meetings and how to have an effective meeting. I think it's important to kind of read that over, but I suspect that you probably have no one from the public attending a lot of your board meetings. And so it's probably not as critical as a council meeting where occasionally they'll have a controversial subject and the house will be packed. And so what your ultimate goal is to conduct your business in an orderly and a disciplined and productive manner. Now, I don't think I have to worry too much about this for board members, but avoid political partisanship. Sometimes I occasionally run into that with city councils that have very strong feelings about one political party versus another. And so hopefully that's not a situation you have to deal with. That I tell people, I actually served on the Board of Supervisors here in Jones County. And I swear, virtually everything that came before the board was not Democrat versus Republican. In fact, I would challenge people to go back through the minutes of those meetings and tell me who's a Republican and who's a Democrat. But occasionally I'll run into this sort of thing in City Hall. Hopefully it's not an issue for you at the library. But as far as rules and procedures are concerned, I gave you that handout, like I said, plus some cities that mentioned that they have some good rules and procedures for their council meetings, that if you needed something for your library board, once again, a city you heard before, Sac City, Decorah, Fairfax, Muscatine, and Esterville were cities that said that they have good rules and procedures for council meetings. Let's go to number 9, and that is to seek an assessment of the public and evaluation of their performance. Some cities occasionally do little surveys, questionnaires. Obviously, the city council is required to do certain public hearings on different projects. If you're thinking of doing something maybe quite a bit different than what you've done in the past at the library, you might even consider having a public hearing if you think it would be valuable to hear what the citizens and patrons of the community think about that idea. Maybe you'd have a little questionnaire laying at the counter there when they check out a book and say, we're thinking about doing this. Here's a little questionnaire. What do you think? What do you think would be the good thing? And of course, ideally, you've got a website, and if you're contemplating changes or new programs or new projects, that you talk a little bit about it on the website and give people a little advance notice of what's going on. Some people love social media. I'm a little bit concerned about the use of social media. Yes, I think you have to have a presence probably, but man, I'm hearing horror story after horror story about things just getting nuts on social media. So the only thing I will say to that's a whole other workshop that you can cover at another time. My only word of advice is be careful, okay? And lastly, when you get all this information from the public and from your patrons, you may need to make some adjustments, and you may have to go back and rethink something that you've done. So, and obviously, I think with a library board, you kind of have two audiences. The one obvious audience you have as a library board are the patrons, the people who use the library. particularly those folks who use the library a lot. And then you might have another group of people that you need to think about, the audience, and that is the taxpayer. Who pays the bill? Who's paying the bill so we can keep the lights on and keep the doors open? And that is most of the time, that's your property taxpayer. So I always tell councils, and my dad was great at telling me this. My dad had a phrase, remember this, he said, as a city manager, it's always easy to spend the other guy's money, okay? And by the other guy, I mean the taxpayer. And so always be mindful of whose money we're spending here and make as good a use of that money as possible. And so don't forget that other audience out there, and that is the taxpayer, so that you talk to them about making good use of their money here at the library. Now, you have no control how the rest of their tax money is spent in terms of the police department and the fire department and street department. That is beyond your control. But when the budgets are put together and the city council says, this is the library's money, you have a lot of power. In fact, I would venture to say there's a lot of states out there where the library board doesn't have the power that you have in Iowa. And that is, once you have that pot of money, you will decide how it's spent. And if the council doesn't like how you're spending it, the only option they have is not give you as much money next year. And of course, you don't want that to happen. So that's the last thing you want. So what you need to be mindful of is that you're responsible with that tax money, so that the taxpayer, who maybe is disgruntled, doesn't go to the council and say, library board's wasting our money. What are you going to do about it? Well, they can't do anything about it until the next budget. And so always kind of have that in the back of your mind, that we do not want to portray an image that will rile the taxpayers. And that goes for anybody in city government. That's just not library boards, but anybody that. Okay, let's go to number 10, our last habit. And we're doing pretty good on time here. We got about 5 minutes, and that is practice continuous learning. Read the handbooks that the Library Association, attend these kinds of workshops, conferences. If you don't have access to it, Cityscape magazine and the Iowa League of Cities has a lot of information on a wide range of topics. And so you can actually go to the Iowa League of Cities website now and get access to a lot of things under the category of resources. And so there's some great information there. And of course, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I'm talking to folks about the importance of reading all this information, because that's why one of the reasons you're on the library board is to help educate and inform our citizens. And so you play a vital role in the community. And so I think it's critical for you then to stay abreast of what's going on. And another good thing is to network with other libraries. As I mentioned earlier, I want to hear what you're doing out there so we can share with other library board members. And what I love about city government is we're more than happy to help each other. We don't have patents, we don't have copyrights on our stuff. We're happy to share it with anybody. So and don't forget your staff. Make sure you budget and allot time for your staff to get training and education as well. We all have jobs where it's required that we keep up to date on what's going on in our field of endeavor or our career. So same thing for your library directors and your library staff. Take time to allocate the funding and the time for those folks to stay abreast of what's going on. Another little thing I mentioned too is a good learning thing is to adopt a good mentor. Having someone that is out there that you can turn to once in a while for help. Maybe it's another board member in another community. Maybe it's a former board member. I know for years when I was city manager, I had a couple people that I used as a mentor. And I mentioned to you earlier, I was on the Jones County Board of Supervisors. I reached out to a gentleman who was on the board in the past and kind of used him as my mentor from time to time. So there's usually someone out there that you can use as a member. I think we got a couple more slides left, and we'll wrap it up. There's a number of publications I keep talking about, and I kind of referenced this a little earlier, but there is a wealth of information at the Iowa League of Cities. And if you go to the category on their website called resources, and then you look under the category administration, you're going to find a lot of information. And there's some articles in there about library boards as well. And what I will tell you, when you read a lot of that stuff, if you just take out the word city council and substitute library board, it will fit perfectly into what you're talking about or what you're doing, because so much of what I've observed that's good for councils could also be good for library boards as well. Now, I gave you what I call a supplemental packet of information. So these are things that I've collected over the years. These are a few things that I downloaded from the Iowa League of Cities website. One is an overview of all these slides. So and the other one is an article that I wrote back in August for Cityscape on these 10 habits. One is on council teamwork and effectiveness. Once again, take out the word council, put in board. Number 4 is effective elected officials, an article on that. Newly elected officials. Once again, much of what's written there could also pertain to boards. And then I added that thing about effective meetings that I referenced. Take a look at that. And the other thing I have is I wrote this a long time ago called Effective Working Partnerships with Boards and Commissions. It was written for city councils. Now, you could take that, it's second from the end. You could take that little one-page summary. It says how to build a good working relationship with your boards and commissions, give it to your council and say, and go to your city manager and say, you know, this would even enhance our working relationship even better if we could do all of these things. And my guess is most of the items you're already doing, but you could use it as a checklist. And I think it would be quite helpful in your relationship with the elected officials and the city manager. And lastly, number 8 was an item that I gave you called communicating your goals to the citizens. So all of those things are there for your use. I've been trying to watch along here. Samantha, have I missed any questions that I need to answer before we wrap it up? Bonnie, have I missed anything along the way?
I don't believe that I have seen anything. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
I had an audio collapse partway through, but
Okay.
I'm just extremely thankful for these overviews. I think it's just great, helpful advice. What do you think, Bon? Anything that you would like to address or that I've maybe missed in the chat?
No, I don't think there were specific questions for you, Patrick, but there was a lot of robust conversation back and forth and a lot of great sharing from the people logged in tonight who were sharing their mission statements and links to their strategic plans. And
that's great.
Yeah, that's good to find out. And a couple of libraries who mentioned the capital improvement planning, which has always been a big deal for me. And I wish I could say it was more commonly done, but I don't think in my neck of the woods, I don't encounter that very often.
No, like I said, I've got a handout, Bonnie, on that subject. I'll send to you.
Great, thank you.
So, okay.
It's really excellent. Thank you, Pat, for your time tonight. And thank you everyone for coming.
Yep, thank you. Hopefully we didn't bore you too much tonight. So, and hopefully you picked up a few tips. Thank you.
I don't think so.
Okay.